Today I want to talk about taking inspiration from different composers and different pieces and applying this to your own writing or improvisation. This is a subject that I'm quite familiar with because ever since I started composing at around really young, but then more seriously around age 13 or so, I would frequently copy a style of a composer. Not in the way that I do deliberately for the How to Sound Like videos, but just subconsciously. And I think that was a natural thing to happen because I was at the time studying a lot of works by a lot of different composers. So I had those sounds and those types of patterns and phrases in my fingers and in my ears. Now what I want to talk about today is taking this much further and evolving from that into a process where we're taking inspiration from something, but we're not necessarily copying it directly and our own voice shines through. And I think that is very important. I have failed and succeeded at this many times in the past. A lot of times this was not conscious as well. In retrospect, there are pieces that I look back to, even quite recently, that I would think, that really doesn't sound like me. Maybe I was trying to go for something, or I was really just directly applying something that I heard or studied. So in a lot of ways, this can be quite a nuanced and complex subject, but I'll do my best to articulate some points. First of all, I think it's fine to copy certain elements of music. We're taking direct influence from seeing something that we love in someone else's music or someone else's style, and we want to make it our own. But in this process, if you focus on copying small forms and different systems instead of pitches, direct pitches, I think this is a way that we're not copying something, in its exact form, in which case that would be plagiarism, and that's not cool. So if we focus on instead studying the pitches, say that we have a sequence of pitches that have a certain pattern or a certain shape, taking that, removing the pitches, understanding the form of that, a small form, and applying our own pitches, our own harmony, our own rhythm, that sort of thing, I think really works. So say that you like a particular phrase or a particular sequence of notes, and upon studying it, you realize that it has a certain pattern and something that you can describe without the pitches. So for example, maybe it's something where we have 3 pitches, and those are offset. So the second pitch is now the first pitch, and then we continue that pattern on and on. Maybe you take that, apply your own pitches. Or maybe you have a phrase where you like the shape of a certain line. So maybe you're taking influence in terms of how it curls around and comes downwards or upwards. The same thing applies to larger forms. So say that you see a form that a composer uses that is not something common, like the sonata allegro form or rondo form. Maybe you can take influence from that and study how the different sections that this composer organized his work into work, and then apply it to your own writing. And in this way, I think it's an appropriate way to incorporate someone else's idea with your own without crossing the line too much. The third thing I want to mention is to try imagining creating a track or a piece that would complement this piece that you're referring to. So in this way, you have a bit of a distance from the piece, and you're taking inspiration from a large viewing range, or just from a distance. And again, going back to trying to avoid direct copying, this could be a good method to keep in mind the things that you want to take influence from, the aspects of the piece that you really want to incorporate into your own work without, again, crossing that line. It could be as simple as imagining your piece or track to be in the same imaginary album as the piece that you're referring to. The next thing about harmony, say that you really like a particular harmonic progression that you hear or you see in a score. Maybe you can apply it in a different harmonic context. Maybe you can combine it with some of your own ideas. Maybe the progression could be fragmented or just switched around. This is harder to describe because harmony is quite layered and it really depends on the context of the whole piece and also the context of what notes are being played over. Sorry about the bell there. But that is the best way that I can think of to describe this type of copying or influence taking. Say that you like a small chunk of the harmonic progression, take that, but put it in a very different set of contexts, textures, placement. And related to that, the fifth thing I want to mention is to take something specific from the piece that you're looking at and combine it with another thing that is very specific. So you have two specific ideas that in the original form that you're studying don't exist together, now will be combined through your composition. And maybe this other specific thing is from another piece or it's from your own original ideas. But the juxtaposition of those two ideas could create something completely different, and therefore this original idea could be disguised, transformed, and it's really not the same. But this is also, it really depends on how directly are you taking this or how much of this are you taking into your own piece, because there could be a gray area where you're taking too much and you're really just quoting something. So something in between really quoting and just taking a small fragment, I think works, in my opinion. So here are some additional thoughts. The practice of taking something and reharmonizing it, taking fragments of it, changing it, transforming it in different ways, I think in general is a great practice, a great deliberate practice to study and gain more fluency in, say, harmony, rhythm, linear movement building, whatever it is in composition and improvisation. So I really view it as a valuable way of studying and practicing. Of course, this can also lead into influencing you to, or inspiring you to write another piece or a composition, really, not just a set of exercises or a practice for the day. And I really am in the habit of doing this a lot when I'm practicing a piece as a pianist. I'll come across a certain section, and in order to just become more fluent with it, technically, maybe I'll make it more challenging and different in many different ways. And I show this in plenty of videos where I'm basically modifying these sections for the sake of becoming familiar with it technically, musically, and taking ideas from that. And I view this as a valuable tool, as just a habitual practice as a performer, as a composer, and a deliberate way of becoming more fluent in these ideas, rather than sitting down and doing this type of process in order to write a piece. Also related to a lot of the points I made earlier on, I think inspiration is best taken from a distance. So really take in what you like about the piece in many different ways, but don't let those specific ideas influence you too much, because then you may be crowding out your own ideas that want to seep in. So for example, the Cuckoo Waltz that I recently wrote after analyzing the Chopin Mazurka obviously has a lot of similarities to it, but If you look closely, the piece that I wrote is not a mazurka. It does not have this strong emphasis on the 2 or 3. The lines that I wrote aren't as Chopin-esque, I would describe it, and the form doesn't follow the mazurka. In general, though, I took a lot of inspiration from the lilting quality, writing something in a waltz-like, mazurka-like atmosphere, something that is a little bit French, a little nostalgic, a little intimate. All of those things, I think, are direct inspirations from the mazurka. And as I mentioned in the video that I recently uploaded about analyzing music, at the time and as of late, a lot of the music that I've been writing is not like this. So in this way, you can clearly see that I've been influenced by this particular genre, this particular style. Grabbing at specific points, I really took in detail the fact that the piece starts off in a single line without the left-hand harmony. So I directly took that, and I think the progression of how the music builds is quite similar to the mazurka as well, and having 2 larger sections, or contrasting sections rather. There are more than 2 sections in the mazurka. But instead of growing outwards and developing the material further after the opening, I resort to this 2 against 3, the chords section, and that is not like the mazurka. And at that point, I do remember kind of abandoning certain things that I had in mind about the mazurka and just focusing on what sounded right and what I wanted to hear next. And so even though the mazurka was clearly on my mind, I just was not referring to it. It was just kind of in the air. The last thing I want to mention is a bit of a question, something I'm wondering if it's possible, maybe it's something that we always do anyway, is to wonder whether or not there's a way of transcribing a piece's artistry or a composer's artistry directly. But it can't be that direct because obviously it depends on the way we perceive this piece's or this composer's artistry. But trying to be as specific about what it is about this piece that characterizes it in a certain way with a certain flavor. In the process of trying to replicate and transcribe this artistry directly, we may very much end up with a piece sounding exactly like the piece we were referring to or the composer. But also on the other end, we may start to plant some seeds in the compositional process in a way where after this initial step forward, we can let go of this pursuit and just take our own inspiration from that point. I don't know if that makes sense, but this is extremely hard to describe, and I'm just trying to articulate some points that I've just been wondering about this whole process. This is a difficult subject. Anyway, that is all for now. I will see you in the next video.